Hey everyone, good afternoon and welcome to our Scale Up Stateside show, where today we're going to be chatting with a very special guest and finding out about his journey from founding an agency to scaling up that business over in the US. For those of you who haven't joined us before, I'm Amy Davies, Managing Director of PGC Group, and we specialise in supporting recruitment firms expand to the US and also in providing employer of record services for contractors and their clients. Today, joining me is Roheel Forsyth, or we call him Ro, as I'm sure many other people do, who is the managing partner at Forsyth Barnes, an agency he co-founded back in 2016 with Scott Parsons. Although founded 8 years ago, initially in London, they've gone on to open a further office in Nottingham, which I believe is Scott's hometown, and also expanded to the US quite early on in their journey, I will add, with an office today in arguably the staffing epicenter of the US, New York City. So, hey, Ro, as a lot of people call you, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I've brought my favourite mug, which is very appropriate for the state that you chose, which we'll come on to shortly. But thank you, Ro, for joining us today. We've got loads to get through. We're really excited to hear about your journey, but we've got to do it in 30 minutes. So we're going to try and cover everything that's set before us. Which really is going to look at the journey that you and Scott have been on to establish, grow and scale your business. And the thrust of our conversation today will be centred on the US arm of the company. Now, if anyone watching live has any questions you would like answering in today's session, as always, you can drop them in the chat function on LinkedIn and we'll do our best to answer as many questions as we can without distracting from the agenda that we've got set. If we don't get time to answer your questions, we will come back to you directly after the episode is finished. So let's get into it. So firstly, thank you so much, Ro, for joining us. I'm really excited to have you on because obviously we've been a part of your journey for some years now, but really seen you scale the business successfully over the last number of years. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for your support. You guys have been phenomenal, especially when making that move to the US as well. I think there's been a few times I've messaged you at silly o'clock or a weekend and come back pretty quick.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think we're an extension of everyone's team, basically. So I'm always getting, people similar to yourself sending me the odd WhatsApp. What does this mean? A client's asked me this. There's a little bit of a minefield, the US to work out, but you guys have done a phenomenal job. But what we're going to do is we're going to go right back to the beginning of your journey, because I know that you actually went to university and studied a law degree. So I'm keen to hear how you went from studying law to becoming a recruitment consultant.
So did law. I just didn't really enjoy the course as much, to be honest. I was only really interested in criminology. And the commercial and financial situation that wasn't amazing. Wasn't really looking at kind of living the lifestyle that I probably wanted to live. So ended up doing a few menial jobs whilst recovering from an injury in Northampton, and then went back down to London and found myself a recruitment job.
I think most people have a similar story. A lot of people say they fell into recruitment, but you very quickly went on to co-found your own business alongside Scott. So, and I know kind of in 6 years, you guys have grown to almost 100 million in revenue with more offices on the horizon. So tell us a little bit about how you co-founded the business, why you did it, and how you've gone on to scale.
So we earned our stripes pretty much. We started about the same time in the same business. We earned our stripes through that business and progressed from top billers through to managing teams and people and so on there as well. And I think about 6 months apart when we left there to kind of work for different businesses at the time. But then found ourselves back together again, working for another business as well, who are kind of one of them was the ex-founder of TJC. Worked there for a time, but it probably just wasn't going at the pace that we were looking for, with the kind of levels of control that we were looking for as well. So we started to knock our heads together, started to discuss what things might look like. We're really open and honest with each other as what we wanted from a business and what our individual visions were. I think just by God's grace, we were blessed that we kind of found each other and that we both had a similar vision, aligned in a lot of ways. Our approaches were aligned as well. So off we went.
And how many heads are you at today?
We're pushing about 80 heads at the moment globally.
Okay. So how did you find that process of scaling the business from obviously starting with you and Scott up to 80 today. And I know you released an equity program some years ago as well to help with.
I think it's been phenomenal. I think we're the largest we've ever been. It's the largest thing that either he or I have managed individually or together. So every day it's a journey. It's a learning curve for us. It's a new experience. And it's no better way to do it by actually doing it other than I'd much rather do it this way than a training course or some sort of course or formal education this way. Not to say that there's no value in that, but I just think that you don't learn anywhere near as much as you would do just going through it yourself.
Yeah, so learn as you go.
On the job. Making plenty of mistakes on the way as well.
Yeah, definitely. But I suppose that's where the greatest growth is. I think it's interesting in recruitment because I do speak to a lot of firms where there's 2 or more founders. A lot of people do build solid friendships and working relationships, and they're able to do that. So was that definitely something you and Scott were mindful of as you came together?
We've always had a weird ability to be completely open and honest with each other without pissing each other off, to be honest. We've had this kind of, it wasn't discussed or agreed, but we kind of fell on this unwritten rule that if either of us is more passionate about any one topic, even by a single percent, we might be going hammer and tongs at it because we're both passionate people. We're both reasonably articulate. We like to think ourselves as somewhat intelligent as well. But if I can feel that he is 1% more passionate or believes in something more than me, then I'm willing to concede. And I might go on record and say, look, I don't think this is the right way, but we'll go with your way. But then I'm fully behind it as well. And it's vice versa. And we concede in that way so many times. Some have described it a bit like a marriage. And again, it is the decisions that we're having to make as well. So, but no, I know you get the age-old story of 2 co-founders. One, they usually fall out and one goes off into the sunset at some point, blah, blah, blah. But we've never come anywhere near that, to be fair. So
brilliant.
That's good.
Sounds like a marriage made in heaven then. Okay, let's jump to kind of the US story of your business. So I know you guys entered the market quite early on in the general journey of the company. How did that come about? Was it that you purposely went after it, or did it happen organically that you had an opportunity there to explore?
Pretty organically, with some design to it as well, I guess. So we started our sports business in 2018. And then from there, we now in conversations from US sporting organizations, teams, clubs, some of the governing bodies and so on out there as well. So it started to gravitate us out that way. The opportunities were big. We started to get into motorsport, the NBA, the NFL, out there, some of the stadia that are out there and arenas that are out there too. So we've been working the US market since about 2018. You mentioned that we've gone out there pretty early in our journey. Would have been even earlier, to be honest. Our original plan was to be out there in 2020, but for obvious reasons, we couldn't make the jump. So we had to just hang fire until the borders open and the embassies opened again.
Yeah, it kind of stalled a lot of companies' plans to expand it, into the market because, well, yeah, as you say, one, the borders were closed, but the embassy I think they had like a 9-month backlog of E2s to work through. And we've done other podcasts, by the way, on immigration. If anyone's listening and they want to have a look at that, where we go through what that process looks like. What was it that attracted you to the US market compared with the UK?
So anyone who knows me knows that everything in my personal life, business life, everything that I look through is always about growth and expansion. I don't know a better environment that you can have than the US when you're talking about growth, scale, expansion, right? Look, the markets are different between the UK and US, and that bit's fine. It's easier to do business here. We're physically present, we're born here and so on. But it's the challenge. It's a challenge of growing something globally whilst not being physically out there every single day. Were we robust enough and good enough in our practices and processes? And the opportunity for that growth and expansion. And that's the number one thing that drives me in anything and everything that I do. And like I said, the platform that it provides is absolutely huge. The scale it provides is absolutely huge. That was the number one thing for us. And plus, we always said from day one that we wanted a global business. So it was always on the cards. It was just a case of when, not if.
And why the US amongst all other countries then?
Culturally, obviously very similar to the UK. Language, again, very similar to the UK. So you haven't got language barriers in there and so on as well. Scale, breadth, like everything all in, it just made the most sense. So we see it as a huge part of our global expansion piece as well.
Yeah.
We're in New York right now. We're not just staying with New York and limiting ourselves to New York as well. West Coast will be the next piece in there as well. Texas potentially after that too. So there's so much for us to achieve, and it's almost like impatiently waiting of, come on, how are we ready yet to get to the West Coast yet? Why not? We're ready to do the tech play in San Fran yet? Why not? Like, we need to be doing this in the next quarter. And then manage your own expectations.
Yeah. And because it's funny you said that. A lot of people kind of say, oh, I'm just going after the US. And, you know, we've said it so many times before, and a lot of guests have kind of echoed what you've just said, Rose, that, you know, you do have to focus on one state or one area first and then look to move out. And it can be quite difficult to know what are the milestones or the triggers that would cause us to then say, yeah, let's open a second office and start to target that. And, you know, a lot of that just depends on how you're controlling that growth and if you've got the right talent internally to be able to start to open a second office. But what prep or research did you do to decide New York, and why did you eventually choose that as the state to open your first office in?
So I think it was less we went by the research and the data. It was more, right, we really want New York, and let's see if there's any data or research that really puts us off it, to be honest.
Yeah.
We set up in London at a time where it was the toughest environment market we could be in and challenge ourselves in, right? So it's the same thing with New York. If we can do it there, then we're confident that we could scale across any other major city or state across the rest of the US. I'm a big believer. I know some people are doing it remotely, and some people are kind of going in your Floridas and your Bostons and so on.
Yeah.
It's fine, and no issues to that at all. For me, I just felt that we had to be in some of the toughest areas and the toughest places to really kind of prove ourselves for the biggest challenge. Yeah. Scott and I were all about challenges. Scott and I were all about like really pushing ourselves hard. So it just felt like this is the most challenging environment we could put ourselves in. Let's go for it. I know there's the tactical element. I know there's various other bits. I know there's the expense that you have with that as well.
Yeah.
But also you've got the talent piece as well, which you can't overlook for people out in New York, right? You look at the tri-state area, how many people flock to New York because it's New York, especially young, hungry-driven people want to progress in their career. So when we start to weigh up all of those things, we're willing to absorb the tax cost and the other cost of living, or the cost of running a business out there and so on as well.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like that song, you know, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere.
Yeah, I try to stay away from the lyrics, but...
Yeah, no, it's a bit cheesy, but it really is, you know, a tough market to operate in. So as you say, you know, if you can try and test your model for your recruitment business and be successful there, then you've got a pretty good chance you're going to do well if you open up second, third, fourth offices in other states as well. Just thinking about New York, so PGC, we were headquartered there for 10 years, and it was really critical to cementing ourselves as that kind of compliance partner for recruitment firms. The fact that we were, you know, on the West Coast and connected, you know, as close as we could be with UK time zones. But also secondly, just being able to meet businesses like yourselves face to face when there was that need to. And I think in New York it is a little bit more tangible with relationships, and some of the clients do like to see you face to face, but I've also, you know, had the feedback. It's also quite cutthroat. You know, you're in and you're out. It's an elevator pitch. Don't call us, we'll call you. How have you found the culture of doing business in New York and winning new clients?
I think, look, personally, I don't think you need to do too much different in the sense of your approach. I think the mistakes that we kind of made very early on, but I think we rectified them reasonably quickly as well compared to some others that I've spoken to, was we tried to adapt too much, whereas the ambition was always from the beginning, kind of found our way back to this path was, yes, there are a few things that we're going to have to change or adapt for the cultural differences, but actually what we've done is worked pretty well. And so we've got to stay true to what the FB way is and what FB is all about as well. So it's making sure that we've got the US version of the FB way as opposed to something completely different overall. There's some elements of you can get with cutthroatness to it and so on as well. But again, with tenacity, which again, there's a cultural piece, they almost approve and respect a lot more out there than they do in the UK. Showing right tenacity, right drive, right ambition, then we've been in a really good spot, to be honest.
Yeah. Have you found that kind of managing clients and the relationship to your clients has changed post-COVID at all?
I'd say the differences that we've had to implement culturally in the US to the UK is really explain our role in the process, because I think some of the clients that even I've spoken to were surprised that we were going through like a 2 or 3 stage interview process before we even submit a shortlist, and they're just kind of receiving resumes off the bat from some of their code suppliers, and that's what they're getting for their money, right? They had a tendency as well to kind of just go direct to the candidates that they're engaging with and start making offers directly and so on and so forth. So at the beginning, there's an educational piece that we started to do with our clients to actually say, we will put the offers in front of the candidates for you, but here's the reasons why. Here's how we tap into psychology. Here's why it's going to benefit you. And we've had to really kind of spell that out. And once you've done it a couple of times with the same client, then they're on board with it. But at the beginning, there's a bit of an education piece that we really have to do as well,
Yeah. And is that because traditional US staffing firms differ to how UK firms work, or do you think it's just, just how the culture is in the US?
I think it's a mix of both. I think there's a more of a culture to try and get a deal done, and more confidence to do so as well. I think the markets are a little more, the US market is a little bit immature, so they've also been having to be reliant on them getting things done themselves, as they're just dealing with actually kind of CV resume body shops, right? And so they're not getting what we would call a normal set of services or suite of services. For them, it might be an added extra, but that's part of our education piece to say, no, this is the standard FB process, but here's what us going above and beyond looks like as well, which has blown some of our clients away.
Well, totally agree. I always say there's no recruiter like a UK recruiter. And I think the kinds of models, the processes, the solutions, and the tech that UK recruiters use are far advanced as a market compared to the US. So I completely agree that educating the client on what actually is your proposition and solution, them understanding what your role is, within that hiring process and what their role is. As you say, they're just greatly impressed by how much time is saved on their end by you doing most of the heavy lifting.
Yeah, and plus, it's not even just a time thing. You've got the quality element when we're actually interviewing people and looking at ambition, culture, some of the logistics as well. Some of the clients aren't getting out there right now as well, which surprised us when we first went out there. But again, comes back to the education piece that we've had to do with clients, because they've been so used to a certain level of service for so long now.
Yeah, definitely. Last one, just on kind of culture and management, is just thinking about the actual candidates for your roles, and how easy has it been to find candidates? How easy is it to manage a candidate pipeline, particularly on the contract side? And does that differ greatly from the UK?
I think some of the access to them has been at the beginning a little bit tougher. And we found that from anything from that you call from a number here, right? And most people tend to like pick up irrespective of where that number's coming from or whatever. Numbers over there are a bit more localized, either by city or by state and things like that. We didn't recognize that straight off the bat. And some of the numbers get picked up on a spam call if one person's reported it through the phone software and things like that. So we had some of those challenges kind of coming up in the really early days. We also had a few frustrations around our IT and kind of telco quality of connectivity, which we weren't expecting, given that we're in a WeWork as well. We've been in a WeWork in the UK. We didn't have any issues like that either. So we had some calls cutting out. We had to look at alternative bits of software as a temporary measure and so on as well. So we had to kind of work around all those things in the very first few months and so on as well. And it probably took us longer then to resolve and troubleshoot than we'd have liked. But there's some areas of access to some of the applicants that we've got. We also have to build a database out there, and we're doing that for a time here, but it doesn't motor along until you're really truly out there, right? But now we're in a really strong spot where when I look at our database and what we've got on our CRM, the CMO of this brand, the CEO of this brand, the CRO of this brand, and so on and so forth as well.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. So we're having to do less and less having to go out, and it's more and more just cultivating the networks and relationships that we've already got, which is a nice place to be in. I think we've done that stronger and quicker than we probably anticipated as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Love that, Ro. You just made an interesting point there about, a lot of people will start remotely, as part of their plan to expand in the UK. I think you said, they'll trickle along. And, once you're actually in the market, that's where you gather that momentum and pace to grow in the business. So completely agree with that. So it'd just be good to talk a little bit about how you did it from building, the team at Forsyth Barnes that would eventually go and grow it out in the US. So did you start in the UK? And how did you go about choosing the right people to start it for you?
Yeah, so we started in the UK first, and obviously things were made slightly easier by the acceptance of doing business over video and so on through COVID and stuff. Right?
Yeah.
So I think in some respects, the timing of COVID for us also helped us and worked positively for us, or probably the other way around. We tried to use it as a positive for us, right?
Yeah.
And then it was looking across the business and looking at people's personal situations as well as where their career was and their kind of progression elements and so on as well. And marrying that up with those that we thought would do the best for themselves as well as for us as well. So then when we went out, started to have some conversations, start to show people the vision and how they'd benefit too, as well as how they benefit through our equity scheme and everything too. And we managed to put a brilliant team together that were doing it from the UK. We put a few targets around it, and then they started taking regular trips out to the US.
Yeah.
Firstly, more kind of business trips, and each trip would get a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Then they started to take a few more like personal trips of getting to know the city. I think barring one, all of them lived in Manhattan in their first year, so it's looking at different areas, Paris and so on as well. Settling, viewing some apartments just to get a flavour of what places look like, even though they're not going to get those specific apartments because the market out there moves so fast as well. So we really tried to integrate them in over a period of time before they actually made the move. We'd been flying over, we had some business exemptions from the embassy, so we'd been flying over from, I think, about fall 21, if I remember correctly. And then the guys actually made their move towards mid-June 22.
Yeah.
And their official launch date was 5th of July, after we celebrate the 4th of July out there, 22.
Yeah. I love the way you just called autumn fall, because when you have a US business, a US team, you do find that your terminology kind of goes across borders, and sometimes you'll use US terms in the UK. I get picked up on it a lot in the UK.
Yeah, the guys in the office do it to me a lot. And we call that sell, and then the UK guys are like, what? Sell? It's like, I mean it.
Yeah, totally. And, little things like that are important actually when, not to go back to business development, but, to use terminology that resonates with, your US audience. It's understanding it, and particularly when you go on to manage a US-based team, as I do today, I have to switch kind of what head I'm wearing and what language I use to make sure it resonates. So just thinking about that team then that you started with in the UK, right? How many did you have?
5 or 6.
Brilliant. And how many eventually went on to relocate?
All of them.
All of them? Well done. That's amazing. How did you manage them? Did they work UK hours, US hours? How did you actually get them to work the market from the UK?
Yeah, so they're doing, we're pretty realistic about things. They're doing US hours Monday to Thursday. Friday, they're doing UK hours because we always do, we always get the whole business together on a Friday anyway. We kind of, the week up on a Friday. So they were kind of doing that. But at the same, they were starting later, I think about 11 off the top of my head. But there's some practicality in that as well, because obviously we were doing some work out on the West Coast, time differences. I remember we had one evening, we had an incentive where we did our elite club. So we're at a 2-star Michelin-star restaurant. I think we then spent the evening there. We'd got to about 1 or 2 a.m. And I'm outside the hotel with Samir as he's closing a deal, because it's a West Coast-based deal. Yeah. And we sat on the window ledge, I think it was the Dorchester, if I remember correctly. Yeah. Sat out on the window ledge of the Dorchester, trying to close this deal out for, I think it might be tonight.
2 a.m.
At 2 a.m. Yeah.
Yeah.
And And so we've always just kind of made certain allowances for when those kind of time zones differences had happened. I was on a pitch with a client about 2 or 3 weeks ago. She didn't know I was back in the UK, but we were on about 10, 11 p.m. She only found out towards the end of the call that where I was. So we've always had that attitude in the business of do what it takes to get the job done.
Yeah.
Kind of fell into that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, a lot of firms that we do work with, the founder, whoever it is that leads in the charge on the US expansion, very quickly realise that there's going to be a lot of long hours and a lot of you're not able to fully switch off. And you're kind of always working, always available to take that call, as you say, whether it's 2 a.m. or 10 p.m., you're going to take that call and close that deal, particularly whilst you're so focused on, gaining traction from the market. And how easy was it to replicate the culture? So you also had this team in the UK, they went over to the US, and then, Machine then went on to recruit Americans into the business as recruitment consultants. How easy was it to replicate your UK FB way type culture over in New York?
I think from a cultural perspective, really easy for us. And I put that down to being so fortunate by having that core team that went out.
Yes.
Are fabulous. Not well, but are fabulous. It's down to them. I'm out there as much as I can be. Scott's out there as much as he can be as well. But that cultural piece I put down completely down to them. The unity that they have across the team, the way they operate and interact and so on outside of the business. It is what I would call another FB office. That makes me proud. But also, I guess I didn't expect any different with that group that had gone out there. They're FB through and through.
Yeah. It's so key to the success is that incubation of that team. And then, when they do move over, making sure you give them an environment to thrive in what they're doing. So not just from selecting who should be in that team, but once they're over there, empowering them to be able to thrive in the business because, they've got to be happy and they've got to be thriving. Otherwise, your business won't be thriving either.
Yeah, completely agree. And look, we'd made some mistakes when we opened the Leeds office here back in about, I think it's 2018. So we hadn't done the incubation to the same level, for the same longevity as we did for the US. So we'd obviously spoken to people like yourselves and a few others who've kind of taken the journey previously. But a lot of the lessons that we learned from Leeds, we then put out and made sure we didn't make the same mistakes when we started up New York. It's harder, right? I used to go to Leeds every week on a Wednesday, or a drop of a hat, not to Leeds. Can't do the same in New York. So it's been better planned, better organised. But again, it comes back down to that core team that have gone out there. They've been fabulous.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, we've got 2 minutes left. I don't know where the time has gone. So really quickly, just kind of some advice to share with anyone who is currently trying to grow in the market or potentially considering. What would be your top piece of advice for anyone looking to start in the US?
If you're doing it from the UK, I would still incubate it in the way that we've done, because that would be our plan going forwards anyway as well, for either the West Coast or further offices. I'd incubate it, get a presence built for yourself, get a network built for yourself, and then show the opportunity to some of your best people in your current business right now. Try and take some of your core or current people from your business and then add people around that as well, because you want to maintain that cultural piece, which is so important. Processes you can get implemented, process can be worked on and seen. You can't see and feel the cultural elements on a analytics piece of software or platform or anything like that.
Brilliant. Perfect. So before we finish then, what's next for Forsyth Barnes? What can we look out for?
So West Coast, whether that's LA or San Fran, because we're running a tech platform at the same time. So we might do that for San Fran. And then from there, we're looking strongly into Dubai to open up Middle East and Asia, because we've already got some clients out that way in sports and youth out. I would love to be in a position where operationally and financially we can do both. Doesn't mean we will, it just means we're really strong as a business as well. Yeah.
Brilliant. Oh, I'm excited to see that happen. And we can have a chat separately about the West Coast. I've got loads of advice I can give you on that. Right. Well, Ro, thank you so much. That is a wrap on today's session. If you are excited by what you've heard today, or you want to understand more about the US market, then we're going to play a very short video now, and you can use the QR code or the link at the end to book a session in with me or one of the team at PGC. Thanks everyone for listening. Take care and see you next time for our next episode.
Cheers.
Want help mapping out your US expansion? Visit us at www.pgcgroup.com to learn more or schedule a free US expansion opportunity session with one of our consultants.